Hello, and welcome to our podcast on the Works Cited page. I think sometimes students make this out to be a bigger deal than it really is, but it is not that big a deal, and so we wanted to talk you guys through why we need them, how to create them, and how important they are in terms of avoiding plagiarism. So here we go. So first off, what exactly is a Works Cited page? This does come at the end of your essay or report or research paper or whatever you are creating. And the point is, it is supposed to list all of the texts that you have referenced in the body of your essay. So if you have opened up a book and you have paraphrased from it, or you have taken a direct quote from it, and you have then used an in-text citation for it, the Works Cited page is the full entry for that source, so that if somebody was reading your original paper and they came across an in-text citation and they thought, wow, that's really, really interesting, I'd like to learn more, I wonder where they got it from, they could look at your in-text citation, then they would be directed to the full bibliographic entry for that source that they would find on your Works Cited page. So for every source that you are using and citing from in your paper, you must have an entry for on your Works Cited page. So why is a Works Cited page important? So for one, it does help avoid the plagiarism issue. If anyone is ever concerned about you taking information from another text and wondering where you got that from, the Works Cited page with the in-text citation will help you avoid the claim of plagiarism because you are acknowledging where you got information from. So at a practical level, that's kind of the biggest reason why we want students to be doing this. Number two, this does allow readers to find the same exact text that you used to do your research from. And this is what real readers and authentic learners want to do. If they are reading something that is of interest to them and they want to study it further, what better place to find more information on that topic but from the paper that they are already reading? So for example, if you are writing a brilliant essay about D-Day and World War II, and you quote some very interesting information that I as a reader had not seen myself, and I really want to know more about D-Day, then your in-text citation would direct me to your Works Cited page, which would let me know exactly which text you used, and it would show me exactly where I could find that. Then, as an authentic learner, I could go to that source and read it for myself and learn more on my own. And this is authentically what real learners want to do. So is there a difference between a Works Cited page and a bibliography page? Because you're going to hear me use them interchangeably in class, and this is actually not all that correct. There is a difference. A Works Cited page is technically supposed to show only the sources that you actually cited from in your paper. So if you pulled out 10 books on whatever topic you're researching, and you read all 10 or you scanned all 10, and you found that 8 of them had really interesting information, and you only cited or paraphrased from those 8, then those 8 would go onto your Works Cited page, because technically those were the only works that you cited. That contrasts with what a bibliography is technically supposed to be. A bibliography is technically supposed to be every source that you read, consulted, or digested in order to create your paper. So going back to our example, if you pulled out 10 books about D-Day and you looked through all 10 and learned something from all 10, but you didn't cite from a couple of them specifically, and some of them you did, technically, all of those books should go onto a bibliography page because you consulted all 10 of them. And then technically, only the 8 that you actually cited or paraphrased from would go on your Works Cited page. So how do you make one? As you read or consult or kind of keep notes from whatever source you are using, you should write down this information. What is the title of the text you are looking at? Who wrote it? How is it published? Where was it published? From whom was it published? And then the date that you accessed that text. So regardless of what medium you are looking at, whether it's a good old-fashioned book, an encyclopedia, a magazine, or the online versions of any of these, we always need to keep track of what's this thing called, who wrote it, where and when was it published, and when did we actually access it for our research. From here, we can then format it into the proper formats, but it's best if we can write this stuff down immediately once we first access the source. Because what I have found when doing research on the internet is that I'll get to a great page, and I'll think this is really going to help me write my paper. And then I get the information I need, and then I follow some link down the wormhole of the internet, but I can't remember where I started. If I had written down or bookmarked or kept track of the title, author, publishing info, I would be able to backtrack and find the original source I used. And in the strictest sense, that is exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be citing where we got our information from. So my recommendation is, as soon as you open up a page and as soon as it starts to give you information you can use, write down the title, the author, all the publishing information, and when we accessed it. Step 2, once we have decided that yes, we're going to use that text, and yes, we have pulled information out that we're going to use and cite, we need to take that title, author, publishing, date, accessed information and put it in the format that MLA requires. Again, at our high school, we use MLA formatting. There are different ways to format the sources you've used, but for our purposes, all of our classes use MLA. And so a couple different ways you can do that. One, you could consult the MLA handbook, a physical, good old-fashioned book that tells you how to format this. Or, more realistically, and this is what most of us do, we go to one of many online tools where we plug in the information that we have from the text we just used, and that site formats it for us. So for example, Citation Machine, bibme.com, Noodle Tools, or EasyBib are all online sources where you can take the information from the text that you accessed, you can take the title, author, publishing, date, accessed information, type it into one of their very simple templates based on what type of source you used, and then it formats the entire thing for you. It tells you what is capitalized, where there's a comma, where there's a colon, a period, etc. It will do all of that for you. And in some cases, some of these online sources will just simply ask you for the title of a book you're using or the URL address of a website you're accessing, and it will actually do all the rest. It will find and look up all the actual other information you need. As always, though, you are responsible for making sure that the MLA formatted works cited entry is correct. So if you just simply type in To Kill a Mockingbird because that's the book you're using, and it's technically not the same edition that you are, or it's an online version versus the print edition, you need to make sure that whatever Noodle Tools pops up is the correct thing. While these are great online tools and can be a time saver, you need to make sure that the information that you are either putting in or that is being looked up for you is completely correct for the source you are using. So once you have collected the information, and then you have placed it into some sort of online formatting tool, step 3 is you actually have to take each of those individual entries and get them onto a works cited page. And so you can see the steps here. We need to place these sources alphabetically into the page by the first word in that entry. Ideally, that's going to be the author's last name. So Bob Smith, you would alphabetize that under S. If for some reason you have some texts that don't have authors' names, then you're going to alphabetize by the next entry part that you come to, which is basically the title. So if we have The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid as a book, we're not going to alphabetize by T as in the, we're going to alphabetize by L for life, The Life and Times. If we're using The Art of War, we're going to alphabetize by A. Additionally, we don't group these by type of text. We don't put all of our books together, then all of our online sources, then all of our DVDs we watched. It's just simply an alphabetized list of every source in that order. We're going to double space the entire page. We don't hit extra spacing after each entry. And the second lines are indented. And technically that's called a hanging indent. And on the next slide, we'll show you what that looks like in Word, so you can actually pull that second line over with a tool rather than trying to hit Tab, which oftentimes messes the whole thing up. Additionally, we need to have the words Works Cited centered at the top of our page. It's not bolded, it's not underlined, it is just simply placed in the middle of the page, and it is double spaced from everything else the whole way down. So we mentioned on the previous slide that the second line of any works cited entry, if it is exceptionally long, it will loop to a second line in your word processor, and that second line needs to be indented. The way I advocate that students do this is to just simply type up their works cited page or copy and paste their entries from their Noodle Tools or whatever. Highlight all of the words, then choose paragraph and double space. Then, finally, go back to the ruler at the top of the Word program, and you're going to see this little hourglass thing that looks like two kind of little triangles stacked on top of each other. While everything is highlighted, go up to the top and grab that bottom triangle. And if you hover your mouse over it, it will actually say hanging indent. Click and drag that bottom triangle over to the number 1, the first tab. That will take any second line that was arrived at because the entry was exceptionally long, and it will just indent the second, third, fourth, whatever additional lines you have. This is a much better way to do it than trying to tab over on those additional lines, because sometimes when you tab over, the entire entry will just move over. Can't explain why that happens, but sometimes it does. So it's definitely in your best interest to highlight the entire page, choose your double spacing, then go to your hanging indent and indent the second lines using that bottom triangle there. So here's what a typical entry should potentially look like. And so this is a model of an entry from a book. And I know we tend not to use a lot of books these days, and sometime when you're listening to this video in 2045, maybe books don't even exist anymore. But here's kind of what all entries should look like. You're going to have the author's name first in your entry. Last name, comma, first name. Then you're going to have the title of the book, and it needs to be italicized because that's what we do to book titles. Then comes all the publishing information. You give the city, followed by a colon, the company, followed by a comma, the year it was published, period, and then go ahead and tell us that this was a print copy of this text. You didn't read it on an e-reader, you didn't read it as a PDF, you read it as a good old-fashioned print book. And so again, this goes back to that information that we ideally took when we first accessed it. Who wrote it? What's the title? What's all the publishing information? If we got that when we first started using that book and then plug that into one of our online tools, it would spit out something like this. We would then copy and paste this into our works cited page. We could space it, hanging indent it, and then we're good to go. Here's an example of a website's entry. You can see that there's a lot more stuff going on when you start to use online sources, and this is where it becomes very confusing. So for example, the information on a website entry is still about the same. We need the author, we need the title, and then we need the publishing information. But as you look at the first line, you're going to see the author's last name, comma, their first. Great. You're going to see the title of the article, cooler things in English than the last guy. Okay, great. You also then need to give the name of the website that is hosting that article, Neat Stuff for English Class, and then the publishing information. Who published it? English teachers who love cool stuff. Then you tell us when that was last updated. Okay, 15th of March, 2012. That is a web-based thing. Then you have to talk about when the article was accessed. So when did you actually get to this? The 3rd of October, 2013. And then the last thing, and this is an optional part in MLA formatting, is the URL address. So www whatever. That way, in case somebody's really interested in reading the same article that you went to, they could copy and paste that URL address into their own search bar and go directly to that same article. It ideally clears you of any plagiarism because you've cited where your information came from, and it helps out the next researcher. If this is a great source for their paper, they could go to the same exact one because you've shown them exactly where the information came from for your own paper. And then finally, once you have each individual source formatted correctly, you need to put them together in a works cited page. And while this is kind of a works cited slide and the title works cited is missing, this is kind of what this should look like. you can see that we have 4 sources here. One written by Bill Bryson, one written by Robert Devine, T.H. Breen, George Fredrickson, and R. Hall Williams, one written by Gerald Graff and Kathleen Birkenstein, and finally one written by Sean Tan. You can see they're all organized alphabetically by the author's last name because each of these sources had an author's name listed. And so we just go by B, then D, then G, then T. If we didn't, we'd alphabetize by the next thing we came to, which would be the first words of the title. Again, skipping any of the A, ands, or thes in terms of where we alphabetize them. So in effect, that is it. Think about philosophically why we need to make a works cited page. 1, helps us avoid plagiarism. 2, it helps other scholars find the same sources that we use. Then think about how we do this. 1, we need to gather all the name, author, publishing information from a source. 2, put it into some sort of online formatting creator. 3, put it all together in an accurately formatted works cited page. And then the last thing is this goes at the end of your paper. It's not a separate file. It just goes at the end of your document so that when you do turn in a paper, whether it's by hand or on an online submission, we get your entire paper and the last page is the works cited page. If we don't have that, that becomes an issue. As always, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please go ahead and bring those into class. We'll get those all squared away for you. Otherwise, thanks, and we'll see you soon.